So, Rachel, let's start out with whatever you want to bring out first.
Oh man, it was really hard to select. This was such a great episode. But the first thing that really resonated with me was the way that Carl talked about parenting. So just to remind us, what he said is that a child is an individual, and that individual is modeling and learning to regulate themselves based on the influence of the parent. And what came to my mind immediately was this is the same role that coaches play for their athletes. Every athlete is an individual, and the coach's job as a coach is to teach them how to regulate themselves and model behavior that they want to see in their athletes. It's a huge responsibility to be a parent. It's a huge responsibility to be a coach.
Very nice. What does this look like, or what should our athletes be aware of? Like, let's hit this from two perspectives, from both, like, okay, from the athlete's perspective and the coach's perspective. What does an athlete need to be aware of in regards to this coach athlete relationship or parent child relationship?
I think that's a really good question. The thing I would say athletes need to be aware of as they're developing and going through the process of building a relationship with their coach is a constant assessment of what it is that they're picking up from their coach. Are they picking up qualities that are helping them achieve what they want to achieve? Or are they potentially picking up qualities that are non-serving?
Yeah, so I'm trying to, like, reel through all the coaches that I've experienced as well. You kind of get a feeling when you're around coaches, right? Like, do I want to emulate this type of person? Do I want to be around them? Do I want, like, do they represent the ideal that I'm trying to become or to realize?
Yeah. And I think a lot of that happens on a subconscious level. Like, there are people that we connect with and there are people that we just don't connect with. What I see consistently in coaches, because I've actually done a lot of coach development with CrossFit coaches, what I see pretty consistently is that athletes connect with coaches that are authentically themselves, that feel really comfortable with who they are. And they have a harder time connecting with coaches who are putting up a front or trying to fit into some kind of role that they think they're supposed to fit into. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And
okay.
Like, that really reflects the biggest challenge that I ever had in coaching was holding in mind this image of what a coach should be, which was like, I suppose I'd look around at coaches that influenced me a lot, like Julien Pineau was a big one, Logan Gelberick, even the seminar staff at my level one, like all these people that I knew, and I held them as like, oh, this is what I've got to be like in order to be successful, whatever success. And I think that's probably a good part of it. Like, I'm recognizing in that person an ideal to develop into and something to emulate, and that's why we have this kind of concept of hero worship. Like, I love, like, they represent the potential of humankind. So it's like, that's great that you're working towards that. But when it becomes a recipe or a prescription for success, and like, it's like, okay, I'm now following their method, then it becomes a bit funky. And that all led to me trying to put on a front. Like, I've got to appear this way if they're going to respect me or if I'm going to be liked. So then it comes into like the whole, okay, is this just a vulnerability thing? Can I be myself?
This is crazy. I experienced the same thing. I almost quit CrossFit coaching a couple of years in because I had this sense that I was supposed to be like the people I admired. And so I was trying to be like them. And I felt really disconnected from who I was. My classes were terrible because I wasn't having fun and being myself. So I almost quit coaching.
That's crazy. What kept you in it?
Maybe you don't know this. You did.
I didn't know that.
You didn't. So
I'm so glad I did.
So you and I connected right around the time that this was happening. I was feeling really stuck in my career. I didn't know where I wanted to go next. I knew that what I was doing was not what I wanted to be doing. I knew what I didn't want to do. I didn't know what I did want to do.
Wow, that's really touching. Thank you. What time to air it as well. I'm so glad. I'm really, really
Live.
glad. I'm live. And I'm really glad I did. Like truly, really glad I did.
Same.
Yeah. It's crazy, the serendipity of that.
Isn't it?
Connected
It's
with
just
Facebook and
nuts.
stuff. Yeah, that is crazy.
Totally.
What kind of coaches were you trying to emulate? What did you look up to when you were thinking about like, okay, this is the kind of the example that I want to set by, and then, or an example that I see as a good thing to aim at, and then what kind of front was coming up?
Yeah. So one of my favorite seminar staff members is Chuck Carswell. He has this very like calming and soothing presence. He's funny, but not distracting. So he hits that really good balance of being able to like keep things moving while also like engaging people and getting them to like smile and relax. And yeah, whenever I watch videos of him coaching seminars, I'm just like, oh, this guy, he's just so great. So it was him. And when I try to be calm, what that comes across as is me like putting up a wall. I wouldn't say that I'm a hyperactive person, but I am energetic. And any of my athletes listening to this will laugh and say that energetic is understating it. So me like putting up a front is me kind of like pushing myself down. When I allow myself to bring my normal energy that I want to bring, then that feels great to me, and it feels great to my athletes too.
Nice. Yeah, I like that a lot. I really, really like.
Yeah.
I was
But
thinking
I
like,
still love Chuck.
yeah, of course. Like
Yeah.
it's just so
Yeah.
interesting to hear. Like we seem to put on the front that we think protects us. Like that's what I was doing anyway. It was like this suit of armor,
Yes.
almost like the knowledge that I could accrue would be protective of my vulnerability. Something like it's
Yes.
like, okay, knowledge is a yeah.
You gather up certifications and talk during classes about mechanics and use really big words, and that's your armor.
Yes, exactly. If I use some
Yeah,
big words,
totally.
then like everyone's gonna know how brilliant I am, and no one's gonna
Exactly.
secretly see the gooey, mushy inside that's vulnerable.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. But people respond to vulnerability.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a very human thing.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
when you see it, it's like, oh, finally someone's expressed the kind of the thing that I feel. And to
Mm,
coach, that's such a powerful, like what you're trying to do is connect with people. You're trying to like
yes.
create that engagement, that trust between each other. And it's that
Yes.
vulnerability leading to trust. And if you can show
Mm,
you're perfect, then like, and that's the way, that's a way to connection.
yeah. Well, and vulnerability is like being willing to own our mistakes, but also just to own who we are as people. And that includes the good things that maybe don't fit into the mold of what we are telling ourselves a good coach is like.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot to that. And that kind
Yeah.
of vulnerability, kind of expressing your most authentic self was, I think, something that
Mm,
Carl spoke about so well. I
yes.
kind of,
So
I'm
well.
like, part of this is as you grow as a coach, as you grow as an athlete as well, you leave behind this old mold of identity of like, this is how I'm supposed to act. And like, once again, that has created this kind of this armor, this predictability, this structure for this is how I'm supposed to act in this occasion, then I get these results. But eventually you outgrow that and
Yeah.
you become a kind of, you aim at something different, you aim at something maybe grander, something more in line with who you want to be. And you have to drop that identity of I am this type of person, along with all the stability, all the security, all the safety that goes along with it. And it's like, okay, like that is a daunting thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. It's daunting and liberating.
Yeah, it can be if you have that
Yeah.
relationship with yourself and you're forgiving
Yeah.
to and compassionate, I think is probably the right word.
I agree for sure. Yeah. Mm. Mm. You brought up something else that Carl was talking about. Are we going to talk about that today? That like authenticity?
Yeah, let's go into that. Yeah, was that in
Let's
your
do
points as
it.
well?
I mean, I highlighted so much from this episode. So yes.
Okay, right. So yeah, I was like, that was really the jumping off point that I had in mind, that kind of that willingness to let your past self go. And even on an athlete basis, as we grow, like we now become, okay, maybe I'm going to be more professional, or I'm going to commit to this on a deeper level. Maybe it's kind of the opposite. Maybe I'm going to have more fun and take things less seriously. And again, like to kind of go into that model of, this is how I think things should be, this like kind of ultimate goal. Like quite often we look at, for example, so many athletes that are kind of decent level athletes look at Matt Fraser, Tia Toomey, and they're like, that is how I have to be. But that's not true. That's how they have to be to get there. Whereas you have to find out what your authentic expression of your truest self is, which is like, that's a load of shit words, because they don't kind of all put together. It's like a mess.
It's not helpful. Yeah. Right.
But how can we unpack that a bit? Go on. Like, how would you unpack that, Rachel, before I just answer my own question?
Unpacking how to find authenticity is the question.
Yeah, right? Expressing the most authentic version of yourself. I said something like that.
I mean, I think you have to first know more about yourself than you do already in order to get to that point, right? It's self-discovery.
Yeah. So, and also trusting that what you feel and what your unique interest is valid and worthy and good enough to be accepted in society or the training environment you're in.
You know, and kind of going a little further with that, not even necessarily needing it to be valued and accepted by the environment that you're in, but feeling it so deeply in yourself that like, this is the only right thing that I can do.
Yeah, because like when you are acting in line with your true potential, like your true potential, not humanity's potential, but your specific potential. It feels like you're on stable ground. It feels like you're on stable footing, and it feels like, okay, I can predict what's going to happen. I feel like, I don't use the word authentic, but grounded again, and that feels solid.
And Carl talked about that. And Carl talked about that. It was having moments where you're thinking to yourself, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and this is where I'm supposed to be. But you have to give yourself the opportunity to find those. So you have to have the self-belief to step out of the comfort zone.
Yeah, exactly right. And specifically with coaching as well, I think it comes down to, part of it is identifying what you truly resonate with, not what the flavor of the month is. I know that what truly resonated with me was not the mobility side of things that was being pushed at the time of my coming into fruition as a coach. Kelly Strout's fantastic mobility one, and what it's evolved into is fantastic, and the Ready State is brilliant resources. But that push is the go-to, this is who you have to be as a coach, or I recognized it as that. But what was way more important to me was isolating what I felt was truly important to me, or truly resonating with me, or connected, or what felt like play to me. And that combined with the traditional kind of care of CrossFit, or the traditional kind of aura of CrossFit, together, that created Mindset Rx'd, and it's become there.
What inspired you to seek the things that resonated with you?
Honestly, it took me a long time. I did go again, using that identity, or that kind of that externalized view of success as a guide. I did that for way too long, and I would look to Kelly Strout and always try and I remember imitating his mannerisms and stuff like that, subconsciously, just because I watched loads of his videos, and he was obviously a great coach. And then other coaches who came along, loads and loads of people that I just kind of thought, okay, that is what a good coach should be. And then it felt, I actually wasn't making any traction in my coaching world until I truly went, you know what, fuck this, I can't live that way anymore. I've got to express who I really am and to go for what I'm interested in. And there was no set path to follow, and that's what feels risky. You create your own path.
There's a quote about that along the lines of, if you can see the path in front of you, then it's not your path.
Yes, it's someone else.
You like find it. Exactly. You find your path one step at a time.
Yeah. And there's who is it? There's Jordan Peterson always talks about this story. It is King Arthur's Round Table, I think, where like his advice to all the knights of the Round Table for finding the Holy Grail, which is obviously a representation of your ideal and your potential, is to enter the woods, the place that you find darkest. So the place that you cannot see in front of you, the place that is like potentially most treacherous to you and kind of undermines what you kind of, or is the most risky to you, but feels like the right call. So that's like an interesting aside on that.
Oh, yeah. I have to think about that more. I have to sit with it.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's a really interesting.
It is. Yeah.
Part of like the notes that I made around that that authenticity piece was this idea that Carl was letting go of his reputation when he moved on from gymnastics world, and that can be a big thing for for your self-image too.
Oh yeah, yes. Reputation can feel like everything when you're, I think especially when you're in a leadership position. The sense is, if I earn a negative reputation, I can't do my work.
Why do you think that is?
I think it stems from attaching to what other people think about us as the path to happiness or fulfillment.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, because it's not as simple as completely disregard what other people think of you and only do what you want, because there's like some societal norms are there for a reason. It's like put some clothes on. That's a societal norm that's there for a reason. Like you can't just walk around naked. Rachel, you can't just walk around naked.
Fine.
Because there's that kind of, if we all do this and live by these rules, then like that creates enough stability that you can go and find your own creative expression.
Yes. Yeah. Creativity was such a big part of what Carl talked about.
Yeah. Where did you see that? Where did you hear that from the conversation?
You know, what's immediately coming to me is the way that he journals. So Mindset Rx has a journaling practice that's part of our testing phase. And we encourage people, for the most part, to use stream of consciousness journaling, because that's the easiest way to uncover the thoughts that stem from the beliefs that are limiting our potential. But he does mind mapping, right? Which is another tactic that I love. And I think I read that he'll also draw sometimes.
Yeah.
And I love the freedom that he gives himself to feel what he needs in any given day and allow himself to do that thing, knowing that that's an authentic expression of what he needs in order to get the value from his journaling practice.
Lovely. And like what's nice about that is, obviously Carl worked with us for 12 weeks. Like I coached him on journaling, and what he did was for about 8 weeks he used the exact structure that I provided, and then he integrated his own personal take on it, and it was like, okay, now you've got it, now you can move with it. But he took some time, again, dropped the ego aspect of potentially, I know how to do this, like I've already been here, and he learned what he could from me, and then brought it into his other elements that were already there.
Yes, that flexibility and adaptability is so important when we're on a journey.
Yeah, exactly. And that combination of like structure and what we know works, plus venturing into the unknown, which is exactly what we do when we find our best athletic performances. It's like, and this links in so nicely to Carl's like best athletic performance. Do you remember him saying about he went from a standard kind of simple routine that he possibly could, and he absolutely nailed it? And that's probably because he was venturing into the unknown a bit, but there was the stability of like, I'm absolutely nailing this process. I know it's doing, but I can always give it a bit more because of that. So we have the structure, we have the known and the unknown.
Yeah, flow state occurs when we have the appropriate challenge skills balance. And what it sounded like to me from that competition experience was that he went in with some non-serving beliefs anyway about his preparedness, influenced by his coach, interestingly, for this conversation. And so his challenge skills balance may have been fine for the routines he had been planning if he had had the self-belief going in, but because he didn't, adapting and doing something simple allowed him to like empty himself of mental chatter. He could just like be in the moment.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And that word emptiness is quite interesting. That's the word that we like together, Carl and I kind of found that's like, that represents that feeling. It's like, okay, I'm not like, there's going to be mental chatter that pops up occasionally. You're going to feel emotion, but it's that kind of that space that you create in order to distance yourself from it. And I don't mean completely detaching, but observing it as a phenomenon rather than like a thing that I'm absorbed and like enraptured by.
Yes. Yeah. That's a skill.
Yeah. I suppose it's what we're working towards, like what we're guiding towards. It is a skill. It's really, really hard. Like when society is so enraptured within its and captivated by its mental states and drawn about and kind of thrown from left to right by the way that we feel, to go your own way and say, you know, I'm gonna stand back from emotion and not let it disrupt me is a kind of an authentic, or a kind of is a step towards authenticity. And therefore,
and it's so interesting you bring up emotion, because I remember hearing him talk about it, and it's easy to almost interpret this conversation as being like, emotions are bad, try not to feel them, but it's actually the opposite. Like suppressing emotion is bad and does not work. It's just letting it happen, but not, as you said, becoming absorbed by it. Like the emotions are neutral.
What kind of emotions are getting in the way of athletes? Where do we see this coaching, and where do you kind of see it when we look around at competitions and training environments? Like what do you see?
Frustration comes to mind first. The word that's coming to mind now is distraction, but that's not an emotion. It's more a state. So anxiety, I think, would be the emotion behind it. So that lack of focus. Self-consciousness is not quite an emotion. That's also a state, but those are big ones that I see in training environments and in competition.
So what might happen, because like, okay, so let's start at the emotion and build towards the behavior. So there's that emotion happening. What thoughts would kind of be recognized, because they're a bit more obvious sometimes?
Lots of swearing often, right? I can't do this. I screwed up again. What are you doing? Self-anger. Right? Like self-directed anger.
And then what behaviors does that lead to?
Oh boy. I think that can be different for everyone. Some people are emotive and will do things like throwing their jump rope on the floor, or you'll see it in the way that they start breathing. They'll kind of like a huff. But I think a lot of people are really good at masking it and keeping it internal. But it's in a way, it's almost worse, because then you're not seeing the way that it's affecting your performance. Like that frustration and self-consciousness may be happening completely internally, but that distraction makes it impossible to perform at your best.
And the goal here is to be able to recognize that emotional state before it becomes behavior and therefore affects the outcome that you're going to get. So it's like, oh, I feel frustration, and then leave it at that. Like that's so you don't chase it and kind of, because sometimes like, oh, I feel frustrated, which makes me feel this, which makes me think this, which, and you follow that whole path down. But if we can create that distance, that kind of that step back and that perspective, that's when we can generate a bit more control, a bit more stability.
And equanimity.
Lovely word. That's what we don't often hear, especially in an athletic environment. You might hear it reading the Tao Te Ching, or if you've been studying but like what how would you define that?
Equanimity is the ability to weather the highs and lows of life, emotion, in a steadfast and steady way. So the image that I think of when I think of equanimity is of a mountain that's having high winds blowing at it, and the mountain is just the mountain. Doesn't matter what's happening outside. It is itself.
Yeah. Okay, so we have this resilience is a funny word for this, because it almost like gives you an impression that you're, I think, fighting something maybe, or like you're
like warrior. Yeah
exactly, like you're smashing down every emotion you feel. But it's like the kind of I'm not affected by this, or I can see it as a separate thing, or a separate entity for myself. I can see it as a phenomenon, not as who I am, or as a absolute part of reality.
Yes. And I don't have anything to add.
Sweet. One thing that I wanted to explore is this idea of putting your world on display. Carl mentioned that, like he said something like, if you, I've got the quote down here somewhere. Imagine your life put on display for the world to see. If there's anything that would make you feel uncomfortable, then that's what you need to work on.
Oh, talk about walking into the darkest part of your forest.
All the
right?
quote unquote shameful parts of who you are, put them on display and see how imagine how the world would react.
Boy, yeah.
So things like you mentioned one, throwing your rope down. Things like
stomping out of the gym.
Nutrition habits.
Oh sure. Yep. Yeah.
Self-loathing, like the kind of the self-deprecating, put yourself back.
The self-loathing is a big one, because we think that we're doing the right thing for ourselves by beating ourselves up for making mistakes, for continuing to self-sabotage, whatever the thing may be. But the underlying like self-loathing is so much more destructive than the self-sabotage itself.
Why is that?
It makes it impossible to be authentic. And that means it makes it impossible to address the underlying reason that the self-sabotage is happening in the first place. Because if you hate yourself, you can't work on yourself.
There's an extra layer. There's an extra kind of, it's like painted on another layer of paint, which stops me getting on to the true depth.
Yes, absolutely. I
saw a similarity between what Carl mentioned there, of like, if you put the world on display, and what Matt Fitzgerald was talking about with benign shaming. That kind of like, you see that as well, right?
Yes, that's a really nice that's a nice balanced way of playing with that, of allowing ourselves to be inspired by other people who, and I think I mentioned this in that episode, but seeing someone else overcome something that we're going through builds self-efficacy. It gives us the ability to see, okay, I can do this because I'm seeing someone else do that. So that's allowed. It's just when it turns into, you piece of crap, like that's
or because I haven't done it yet, or something like that.
Yes, that impatience. It has to be now, or I'm failing.
Naval Ravikant, who is my flavor of the month and probably flavor of the last 3 years. He has this phrase like, impatience with actions, patience with results. So when it comes down to actually doing something, it's like, okay, I'm gonna just get shit done. Like I need to prep my food. Okay, like I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to get it done. I need to do some mobility. Okay, like impatience, like just do it right now. Like stop pissing around and just do it. I need to do my strength cycle. Okay, I'm just going to get onto the barbell and start squatting. But that does not apply to the results that you get. So it's like, okay, we need some patience with the and some space between, okay, I need to do this mobility for 3 months, or I need to do the squat cycle all the way through the 12 weeks of the program, or the nutrition cut that month, or whatever it is.
Yes, we'll talk about embracing the process, right? We can set those internal boundaries of stop goofing off and do your mobility right now, Rachel. This is a reminder for me later. So that's an important skill to have and tool to use for ourselves. But yeah, what you're saying is exactly right. You can't be doing it for the results. That's an extrinsic motivation, and it doesn't work.
And to link back into the original conversation, that's where authenticity comes into it as well. Because if you're doing it for just purely for the result, then there's a chance that those results that you're seeking aren't completely in line with who you actually want to be, and your unique skill set, your unique strengths, your individuality, which feels again like it's risky to not go down these tried and tested methods. Because I look at the end result of Tia, I look at the Matt Frasers, Brent Picasso, everyone that, and I look at them like, that's how I've got to be. Well, no, you've got to be you, your best version of you.
Yeah, preach it.
So, what else have you got to bring out? What are the points from this?
We talked about reputation. I thought that was really, really nice. So one of the bigger parts of the episode was about intentional language and how being multilingual gives him even more tools to access exactly what he wants to say. But it's not only what he wants to say to others, it's also what we want to say to ourselves.
And how we recognize what we're already feeling, or recognize that being able to describe something better.
Oh, yes, for sure. And I think that's where a creative journaling practice can be really helpful, because when I'm journaling personally, it's not neat. It's all over the place. And I'm often repeating sentences over and over again because I'm trying to get to what feels like actual truth. You'll often scratch the surface on the first attempt, and then you get a little bit deeper, and maybe you'll try something and, okay, that's not quite what I mean. Let me try again. There are repeating sentences in almost all of my journal entries.
This is why we write. This is why we get something out of our head. I heard the example the other day of if you wanted to say you're an architectural engineer and you want to build a bridge, you don't just think and just hold it in your head and then go and do stuff when there's a bridge. You think about it, and then you write down some rough sketches, and then you go have a conversation with someone else, and it's through that expression of it, putting it down in paper, that you can create something real, instead of just holding something in my head, just trying to think that that's gonna to work through it. We need to kind of iterate and put stuff down.
100%. We write in order to understand. Even as a writer, I write to understand. I often don't know what my point is when I first start an article. I'm writing to understand what my point is.
Yeah, and that's exactly the same with journaling, which is why when I personally see someone's journaling, or a photo of someone's journaling, one of our athletes, for example, and it's meticulous handwriting, and there's not a single swear word in there, that is not real. That is not who you actually are, because we are not perfect. You're doing that for someone else rather than for yourself.
Yes. Which, we recognize as a challenge, because they are writing it for us when they're right. But it's fine. It is finding that balance of being legible enough for your coach to read you and and being genuine.
To write like crap, we can't understand you.
Yes, unfortunately. Yeah.
I love that. So was there anything that you took from that point around the intentionality of language, and that you would apply, or something maybe that you reinforced something that you're already doing?
Ask me that question again.
Okay, so this is an exact example of what we're talking about, like using language to go back and actually like create a sentence that's intelligible rather than just me bumbling through the English language and hopefully hitting the right words. Was there anything, I have to do this well now, was there anything from Carl's conversation, specifically his pieces around intentionality of language, that reinforce something that you think is important or potentially change something you're going to be doing?
So reinforcing for sure that language matters in journaling. I can remember once filtering my journaling, but I caught it and I was very proud of myself for catching it. I was describing a situation, and the way that I described it was, that really hurt my feelings. I realized that I filtered it. So I went on to say, actually, it felt like a slap in the face. And that intentionality of language, like owning how upset I was about it, gave me the tools. It gave me the signal that this was something I really needed to address. If it just hurt my feelings, then it's on me and I need to get over it, right? Like work through it. But it actually required a conversation.
That's interesting, because there's also the piece there of like, that hurt my feelings. So this is something that happened to me, and therefore I was complicit in the event and therefore my actions.
Yeah.
So that did it to me, as opposed to it felt like, which is like a statement, because it did feel like that.
Yeah. It was more truthful in many ways.
Again, if we're going down the ultra realist path, that's closer to becoming an ultra realist.
Absolutely, 100%. And being an ultra realist is also being really authentic.
Yes, because you're not allowing expectations of others or your interpretation of others to dictate who you are.
For sure. Yeah. I think too, intentionality of language for coaches is critically important.
How so?
The way that we praise can be very loaded. So if we go into class environments and praise athletes for extrinsic motivators, like, wow, you're so strong. Oh, you're really good at that. Wow, you got that fast. What we're communicating is, I value how strong you are. I value how fast you learn things. I forgot what the other one I said was, but we're communicating our values when we praise. So if instead we're intentional with our language and really think about, okay, I want to praise based on effort, like, wow, you worked really hard at that, or I could tell that you were focusing, like, great job. That's that intentional language helps athletes build a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset.
Yeah. And linking back into the parenthood thing and how we condition children, that is an exact representation of how we'll probably praise as a child for the reward, or for the outcome that we achieve. Like, well done for getting this mark at school, for being this type of person. Like, it's the steps you took along the way, the effort you put in.
Yes, you worked really hard at your homework.
Yeah.
Is great praise. You got an A is
rather than
praise.
You are clever, you are smart, like,
yes,
whatever.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Because then, of course, within that, it's, if I don't achieve an A, then I'm not smart. And that's the
exactly
kind of hidden mechanism there.
Cool. Yeah. And then intentionality with athletes, the way that they allow themselves to speak to themselves.
Yeah, exactly right. So I'm going to pull out this, which is our game plan doc that I've been working on. For how to essentially make every session count. When I was creating this, I put the smallest part of like self-talk to use, like very small like section for like to fill up, like, this is the self-talk that I'm going to use in this session, because we don't want to be overcomplicating this. We want to choose one or two phrases to use and just like, okay, I'm going to nail it now. Like, this is going to be it. And that is how to be more intentional with language rather than trying to master everything at once.
Yes. I'm trying to have a perfect workout. That's literally not possible. But what you can do is focus on one or two movement cues, give yourself some kind of like encouraging praise for how hard you're working and that you're on the right path. And it's so much more effective than trying to have a perfect workout.
Exactly. You can get a better workout than you could have done potentially before, but you're never going to be perfect. Never.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Yes. Cool. Do you have anything else that you wanted to bring up from Carl's interview?
That feels so good to me.
Me too.
Right?
I think that's perfect.
Yeah.